I'm welcoming viewers in Massachusetts, viewers all over the social media, and viewers all over the world. My name is Ronald Bernard, and I'm introducing the show called Integration. Integration is the show that comes from the partnership between MCTV, which is Multicultural Television Network, and Immigrants Development Alternatives IDA, which is a nonprofit that serves people who are resettling in the US. And one of the programs they have there, it's about civic engagement. Uh, Try to make people understand how they can, engage into the civic duty and civic activity in the community. Based on that, we have tonight with us Jessica Boling. Welcome, Jessica.
Hi, Ronald. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for accepting our invitation. And all the audience, we have Jessica because she's number one, a community activist, and number two, she's a former Biden campaign staff. So we're gonna talk about the experience that she has, either as a community activist or while she was working at the Biden campaign as staff. So how about you go, Jessica, in a brief background of yourself to the audience of MCTV who are listening to you right now.
Yeah, sure. So like Ronald said, my name is Jessica Boling. I have a background in social work and international development. Most recently, though, I was working on the Biden campaign, and I've been working in Wisconsin to start a coalition of AAPI organizations, and AAPI stands for Asian American Pacific Islander. And that's an umbrella term for all the different Asian ethnicities. Yeah, and I've been in Wisconsin for about the last 7 years or so, working some various jobs that focus on different community aspects. And right before I moved over to the campaign, I was working for an angel investment network and venture capital.
Okay, that's a lot of experience there. So as we focus on first the community activist part, what has let's say the trigger, what has driving you to, get into becoming an activist for the community?
Well, I'd say I think my parents instilled in me at a very young age to, wanting to do good for the community and giving back. And then my college education, because I went to a Jesuit school, was very, very focused on social justice. And so it integrated really nicely with my upbringing. And then it kind of realigned my dedication to social justice. And so everything that I've done, I think, has been, related to improving the community and involving the community. But more recently, I've become a lot more active because of the rise of anti-Asian racism due to COVID-19. So we saw what was happening across the country. And so a group of friends of mine got together and we started talking about what we needed to do and what we needed to do to make sure our voices are heard and that we're protecting our community. And from there, we decided to create this coalition, and that's been a really big, catalyst for my activism. I've always been, someone that likes to empower and uplift voices, and of course within the Asian American community. But I think this is maybe one of the first times where it's felt so personal. In the sense that, I did, when everything first started happening, as we were shutting down, I felt very uncomfortable walking outside alone, being in, just public spaces. I've never had to feel so threatened before. And now we're seeing a second rise of COVID attacks. And so that has me, us ramping up again to make sure that the Asian American community is heard and that we have the resources to handle everything.
Okay, as you mentioned, are you still involved with the organization, or what's really going on now in terms of your involvement?
Yeah, so right now I am the co-chair. We started last April. We launched last April, and we've been meeting and working on different community issues. And then this last year, since the COVID we've seen the uprise of anti-Asian attacks. And so we're refocusing on what we can do about that, and looking at, coordinating with different organizations and government entities and possibly law enforcement to, create a good foundation for the Asian American community to feel like they're supported.
Okay, so I think as you heard in the introduction, it's from Immigrants Development Alternatives. And I believe that people who are listening right now who are in Immigrants Development Alternative, probably they will reach out to you to see how we can connect somehow. And because they have the civic engagement part and many things you've been saying, this is things they would like to accomplish based on, in Boston, especially in Massachusetts. So now let's talk a little bit about your involvement in Biden campaign. So what has pushed you?
Well, I just, after 2016, like it was just heartbreaking, devastating, frustrating, like every single emotion you can think of after 2016, and just seeing like you didn't think it could get worse, but it kept getting worse and worse and worse. And I knew Wisconsin was like, from all of the research and all the studies and the projections, Wisconsin was going to be the most important state in the election. And so I felt like it was, my duty to step up and help Wisconsin win, because we needed to win. It's kind of like, at this point, it felt like, with COVID and everything, life and death. And so it really pushed me to step up and work on the campaign. I didn't necessarily have the plan to work on it, but yeah, once everything kind of fell into place, I was like, this is like what I was meant to do.
Well, I'm looking at myself, like wonder, how people, when you just a campaign, involving a campaign, it's a huge, job. Like I believe there's a lot of outreach, and during the COVID, I could imagine, how things are. So what were you doing exactly when you were involved in the Biden campaign?
Yeah, so I was I was the AAPI state director, again, that's Asian American Pacific Islander. And so I was responsible for bringing out the AAPI vote. There's not a large population of AAPI. There's about 3.3% AAPIs in Wisconsin, but that's enough to swing an election. You might not remember, but 2016 was determined by less than 25,000 votes, and 2020 was determined by, about 20,000 votes as well. So while there's about 90,000 eligible AAPI voters in Wisconsin, that's more than enough to swing an election. So it's an important vote. I think they often go overlooked. We are rarely reached out to. We rarely have targeted ads. We rarely have, resources put into our community from the different political parties. And so I'm happy that the Democratic Party and the Democratic Party of Wisconsin and the Biden campaign have put the effort in and recognize the importance of the AAPI vote. And they've also made a commitment to, keep them involved throughout the next, permanently. So they've hired a permanent staff person to maintain the relationship with the API community, make sure that they are civically engaged.
Okay, thank you. And the audience, you're still listening to Integration, and we have with us Jessica Boling, and she's talking about her experience as community activist and through the Biden campaign as staff. So how would you describe the experience you had at the campaign, especially,
Yeah, it's probably like a very unique situation because it's such a short amount of time and there's so much work. It's obviously very different because we were on Zoom, and I think it would have been very different if we were in an office and we had all that energy going. It would have been great. So it was a little different this time around. Maybe I want to do another presidential because I want to get the real feel. But it was great because like everyone was working towards, everyone's working towards getting Biden in office. And so there was a lot of energy. People were turning out to help. And, you know, it was long hours, but it felt like it was worth it. And it was just this really long sprint to the end. And yeah, I think it was really cool too. Like with the one thing that's great about Zoom is that, you know, you don't actually physically have to be in the space. So we're able to get a lot of politicians and celebrities to come be part of our events that you wouldn't normally get if you had to be in person. And so we had quite a few events for the AAPI community, and turned out some really good celebrities like Yo-Yo Ma, Daniel Day Kim, Michelle Kwan.
Wow.
And so it was, so in that sense, it was really cool that it was Zoom, but obviously we would have preferred to be in person.
Yeah, that means also to the Zoom, we had a lot of fun as well, right?
Yeah, I think we had a lot of fun. Yeah, we had some good programs that I am pretty proud of. We had one where we did cooking, and they talked about different issues within the AAPI community. Grace Ming, the congresswoman from New York, and then a recently elected state representative in Wisconsin who's Korean, and so they made Chinese pulled noodles and had a nice talk about, you know, AAPI issues and the rise of anti-Asian racism and the bill that Grace Ming was putting through. And so I think that was really fun.
Okay, so as when I say we're working, IDA, Immigrants Development Alternatives, working in the community to make them understand the importance of civic engagement. So what would you share with, you know, people who might be skeptical, like, you know, my involvement not going to change anything, you know, even like their civic duty in terms of involve, like, you know, helping with a campaign or go to vote and stuff like that. So what is the encouragement there? What is the advice based on your experience would you share with people who might be skeptical to, you know, to say, okay, let me take the first step, let me engage, you know?
I think within the AAPI community, and then just in general, I think people should understand that their vote does count, especially in local elections, which affect you more directly. So, you know, sometimes like our city council or alderman positions come down to, you know, under 100 votes. So that really does matter. So, you know, your the resources distributed to your community, you know, your ability to get like street signs or street lights or safety, or different programs, or if a certain company is going to come into your district, like that's really important. And so every vote does count. Even though I know it feels like at times like it doesn't, it does. And then like, I think also just highlighting the importance of like their involvement in the process. So like when we're going through the Biden campaign, like showing those numbers of like, look, there's 90,000 AAPIs in Wisconsin. That election was only lost by 20,000, 25,000 votes. Your vote will count. It does count. AAPIs have the ability to flip the entire nation. That is a lot of pressure on you. Please stand up and speak for yourself and speak for your community. It's so important. And I think just like relaying it back to issues that might matter to them. And I think with the AAPI community for this election, it was, you know, we've seen this rise of anti-Asian racism, and it's because of the remarks and rhetoric that Trump had around the coronavirus. And so talking about like making that direct connection and being like, do you like and saying like, you know, this is affecting you. If you want this to change, you need to go out and vote. And if you want to complain, like you should also be part of the solution to make things happen. I know it's really hard and it seems really abstract, but it's really important. It's really important for everyone to vote. And then also just like feel like you have some like skin in the game and involvement in your community and the benefit of it.
Okay.
If I may ask a question, talking about, you know, the AAPI community in Wisconsin, what are the demographic over there? You say 90,000. Who are they?
Yeah, and so I think, and then this is like an area where I can like tie a little bit back into the immigration aspect. So I would say the largest population are the Hmong. They are refugees that had resettled here in the early like 70s or around the 70s. And Wisconsin has the third largest population of Hmong in the US. So they're the largest population. Then we have Chinese and Indian that follow after that, and then much smaller pockets of Filipino, Korean, and I'm blanking, Vietnamese. Yep.
Going back to your job as a staff, since you are not living in Wisconsin, and also in that crazy COVID situation, what were the main challenges to communicate with this population? We know, for immigrants, sometimes, for the second generation, they are, techie, people, it's easy, people your age to communicate with them. What about, people older than 50, 60 who are not savvy in tech? What were the main challenges to get your message?
Yeah, so just I live in Wisconsin, but
I'm sorry.
Yeah, I live in Wisconsin, but I'm staying in Washington with my parents right now. Yes, but we're still on Zoom, and it's very difficult to communicate with people. We took a few different approaches. We also the Biden campaign also had national affinity groups that helped out with different events and materials. And so we had Hmong Americans for Biden, and they were absolutely crucial to getting out information to the Hmong community, translating, and then knowing the best approaches to how to reach populations like you're saying, like the elders in the community that might not have the language proficiency, and so we needed to reach them in in Hmong. So we did a few different things, like we did Hmong TV, where we had someone go on and speak in Hmong and then have that broadcasted. And that's also like a Facebook platform as well. We did Facebook Live discussions. We found, I think in many different communities, that there was a really big problem with misinformation and disinformation going out there. So we launched a Facebook Live series where we addressed issues every week, and we spoke in Hmonglish, like we spoke in a mixture of Hmong and English, and just addressed the topics in like a really conversational way that seemed like a little bit more accessible than like just talking at people. We had materials translated. We had audio that could be shared. We met with elders, like clan leaders. So there's a very hierarchical, patriarchal structure within the Hmong community. And so we met with the elders and like had talks with them, and then had them go and disseminate the information to their communities. We also asked younger folks to get their parents or their grandparents to vote. So we asked them to help them, fill out the absentee ballot. Voter suppression is very real in Wisconsin, and a lot of absentee ballots were thrown out during our spring election because people didn't fill them out correctly. So we had to really launch a campaign to be able to show people how to fill out their absentee ballot correctly, and then make sure that they return it on time. So that all had to be in language, and then we had videos that could be shared. There's so much more that we could have done, and I think that should be invested, but those are some of the approaches that we took.
And now, beside immigration, and also I would say the personality of the former president, what other issues you think you focus on to move that community toward Biden?
Healthcare was a big one, with COVID happening and COVID affecting, communities of color disproportionately. And that included some of the AAPI communities, lack of resources getting to them, lack of translation. So people didn't quite understand. And, so I think like talking about healthcare was really important. One thing that also is very important within the Hmong community was deportation. During Trump's presidency, he said that he was going to deport all the Hmong and Lao criminals that they had committed crimes, and so he was going to deport them, and that was very scary for the Hmong community and Lao community, and so that was another issue that we talked about. What Joe Biden would do and how he would prevent that from happening. And so, yeah, I think deportation, healthcare, education is always a really big one. Wanting to have your kids have a great education and not take on like the debt, and having access to upward mobility was really important.
So Jessica, what I would say, it's thank you, because you share a lot of information about your work and what you, for diverse community, you've been involving, and how the campaign has been a tremendous experience for you. So thank you for being on the platform of MCTV, and we look forward to have you next time on the platform.
Thank you, Ronald. I really appreciate it. It was great.
And all the audience, that has been Integration, the show that is presenting through the partnership between MCTV and Immigrants Development Alternatives. I'll see you for the next show, everyone. Have a good evening.